It's absolutely fantastic to be here today. Great to see this type of event in Scotland, and hopefully it's the first of many. So shout out to Colin and the team for kind of pulling this together, and really excited to see where it evolves. So I'm Sarah Forbes. I'm from Scottish Enterprise. For those that don't know what that is, it's Scotland's Economic Development Agency. And we are very much focused on growing Scotland's tech sector and looking for economic opportunities around that. So why we're here today, we are looking at the opportunities of blockchain in Scotland. This came about really after last year. We had a report that was released that talked about this 4 billion opportunity that there is for Scotland in this space by 2030. So in response to that report, this task force was formed. So we brought together different leaders in the blockchain space in Scotland, along with industry, academia, and other stakeholders within the tech sector. So from that, is this going to work? There we go. So from that, the Blockchain and Digital Trust Task Force was formed. You can pull your phone out now and give the QR code a little scan and follow our LinkedIn page. That will be where we'll be sharing much more activity going forward. And just to give a real quick overview before I hand over to the rest of the panel to do introductions, we came together to really look at how do we drive adoption of blockchain technology across Scotland's key industries. And really from the reports and kind of what we've looked at in terms of where the big opportunities lie, this is around things in energy, fintech and financial services, manufacturing and health. So we've got a real vision in terms of what we'd like to do in this space. We've created a roadmap, which you'll see some of the themes are at a high level above you there. And really today we're here to talk about what some of that opportunities look like. So I'll stop speaking now and really get into the panel. So we'll start off with some introductions and really asking everyone on the panel what your interest is in blockchain and kind of why you joined the task force. So we'll start off with Peter, who is also our chair of the task force.
Thank you, Sarah, and hello, Glasgow! Always wanted to say that in the Barrowlands. Yeah. So, my name is Peter Ferry. My background as a developer, I joined big tech way back in the 90s as one of the founders of Microsoft in Scotland. But after that part of my career, I founded a blockchain company, initially called Wallet Services, now still trading as Sika here in Scotland. And we were all about the sharing of verifiable data securely within networks of organizations, initially applied to the government space, because that's where we thought this technology could really find its industrial application, and the company's still trading and applying this in the verification of emissions data in the energy industry. But in that whole arc of my career in Sika, I faced a lot of the challenges around adoption of this technology, and very often we would be speaking to people within the blockchain community. We're preaching to the choir. They understand the potential of the technology, but when we actually speak to people within industries here in Scotland, they had to have that explained to them. They had to be educated, and it's a very difficult job for a startup company to actually fund that kind of activity and get and take a product to market, which is why it really took me to working with Scottish Enterprise and the task force to try and not only educate, but to really drive the adoption of these technologies so that there's a market for the sorts of innovation that we see from blockchain and the trust technologies. That's me.
Thank you, Peter. We'll go to Tom next.
Hello, Glasgow. I'm afraid I can't do it with quite so much zeal, but I was a Glasgow resident for 4 years, so I'm glad to be back here talking to people. I'm currently the Chief Data Officer for Scottish Government. I was previously a data scientist across a number of UK government departments. But alongside that, I played a role since the UK Chief Scientific Advisor's report on blockchain back in 2015 in trying to raise the awareness and understanding of blockchain and other distributed ledger technologies across UK government. So right through the last hype cycle, I found myself trying to cut through a lot of the misunderstandings, a lot of the missellings of blockchain. And I'm now having to do that for AI for Scotland. So it feels a bit like history repeating itself. But I am keen during this phase of the hype cycle that while some of that misselling is subsiding, we land with all of the people who could be benefiting from blockchain technology, messages about how it can be useful, how it could deliver massive value to the Scottish economy. Now, a lot of my day job, apart from AI, is about the sharing of data and the reuse of data. And it's in that context that we've just launched a challenge to startups and SMEs in Scotland to help innovate on how approvals for data sharing separate legal entities are managed. And I would really like to see the blockchain community pitch in some potential solutions to that challenge. You can find it online if you search for CivTech. Otherwise, in terms of blockchain, see some of its greatest potential through decentralizing some of the data infrastructure that might underpin markets which could otherwise be more competitive. So things like reputation systems in particular, which turn into a monopoly in what could otherwise be a healthy, competitive market. I see a lot of potential for distributed ledger solutions to help make sure that everyone involved gets a better experience.
Thank you, Tom. And we'll go to Nicola next.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. Well, in maintaining the fashion, hello Glasgow and hello Scotland, even more importantly. I'm absolutely delighted to be on this panel today and have the opportunity to talk to you about what's happening in blockchain, indeed, and FinTech Scotland. So let me start there. So FinTech Scotland is a cluster organisation that is here to help Scotland achieve economic potential through innovation in technology applied in financial services. So that is why blockchain and distributed ledger technology is really important. Scotland has a significant heritage in financial services. We have had that footprint in that industry since the 1600s. We are also innovators long before that. And so as we think about shaping the future of that particularly important sector, this type of technology offers us that springboard and that potential. And we're already seeing it applied. So that's where my interest lies, very much in that potential opportunity to really be the leaders in a very important, prominent sector that underpins our economy here in the UK and indeed in the world. My background before I joined FinTech Scotland actually is in financial regulation. So as an ex-regulator and someone who led supervisory functions within the FCA, we're privileged, I think, in the UK to have a regulatory environment that is starting to really embrace innovation where we could take this. And I'd love to see us do more with this type of technology. So that's my second interest. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicola. And last but most definitely not least, the brilliant Bill Buchanan.
Hello, Glasgow. Hey, that was disappointing. So I'm Bill Buchanan. I'm a professor at Edinburgh Napier University, just along the motorway, another fine city. So my area is cryptography. I eat, sleep, and breathe cryptography. Cryptography goes back 50 years when you think it all started with Whitfield Diffie and Marty Hellman, and I've been very lucky to actually speak to those two people and to talk to people like Rivest, Shamir, and Edelman, who really have built the foundation for our world. So my key areas that I work in are digital identity, trusted information sharing, and we're really focusing on areas such as homomorphic encryption. Post-quantum cryptography is really going to revolutionize many of our industries. And zero-knowledge proofs allows us to be able to build systems which have the citizens' rights to privacy at the core. We're very lucky in Scotland to support spin-outs and startups. And I think this is a small country which supports that ecosystem. We've created 4 highly successful spin-out companies from the university. And I think universities are a core to enterprise and innovation. They might not be the seed of it, but they can certainly provide the people power that are required. And I think it's important that we develop that talent within our universities to be able to supply the cryptographers, the blockchain engineers, and the architects of the future. And I think it's important that we look at the areas that will be disruptive. Trusted AI. AI is harvesting our data like never before. It is stealing intellectual property like nothing ever. And it's going to the very few companies in the world, the Microsofts who are funding OpenAI. They're harvesting our data, Facebook, and so on. It's important that we need to understand what intellectual property is and how we actually protect it. So we need to move towards trusted AI and integrate privacy and trust into that. And that really involves cryptography at its core and blockchain. And if we think of our industry, it goes back to Ralph Merkle. When people ask me, what is blockchain? I say, well, it was all created by Ralph Merkle all those years ago with his Merkle tree. And I think it's easy to forget where our roots of our industry actually is. And it's really in providing that trust. The internet we've created is really flawed in terms of its security, its privacy, and its resilience. And we need to destroy that infrastructure and build a new one. Thank you.
Hear, hear.
Revolution.
Thank you very much for that, Bill. So I think you've actually just answered probably my next question in terms of where you think the biggest opportunity is for Scotland. And I think you'd really called out digital identity, which is a really interesting area. So I'm going to go to the rest of the panel now and ask each of you where you think the biggest opportunity lies for Scotland in blockchain digital trust technologies. And I'm going to start with Tom.
Absolutely. I've already given one plug for where I see an opportunity from blockchain, but I'd extend that to digital trust generally, that the cryptographic techniques involved in blockchain and related to blockchain, I see having a lot of potential for secure data sharing so that without anyone having to compromise their individual privacy, we can all as a society benefit from the insights that come from that data. And I appreciate as a data scientist that often the value of data comes when it's combined rather than when it's held separately, rather than it being a question of individuals' data having a very kind of separate value. It's really about having infrastructure in place that lets us realize the collective value of data for everyone's benefit, rather than for just a few who happen to control the infrastructure. Now, on the subject of collective interests, I'm also a keen advocate of the research around what's called collective intelligence, which is the process through which we make decisions using everyone's input rather than relying on one person to make decisions for lots. And there too, I see a lot of potential of this technology removing one of the naturally centralizing forces in the way our institutions are built, so that our institutions can be more democratic and so that we can make decisions informed by more people's insights.
Thank you, Tom. And I'll move on to yourself now, Peter. Where do you think the biggest opportunity is?
Well, I'm kind of with Tom here because I think, although there are many opportunities for this technology, I think particularly in Scotland we have an environment where in government and in public life there's huge potential for us to create seamless government services. This is something in my experience. I have a small role with Estonian government, and in the early days, going back to the 90s and 2000s, I saw the sorts of transformations which can be which a country can go through in its public services by adopting new and innovative technologies. And my own personal passion when I founded SICA was to try and use these technologies to join together the government services that we all use, because this is the most impactful thing that we could do with the technologies for our own in our own personal lives. And it's already been mentioned some of the uses of these technologies, for example, in identity, in the secure and privacy-preserving sharing of data. Without the use of decentralized technologies, then there's a whole bunch of pretty big problems that we have to solve as a species almost, that we're not going to be able to solve. How can we measure the veracity of environmental reporting if we aren't able to link together companies and share data in a verifiable way? How can we automate government services if we have no clear idea of individual identity and the ability to have some control over how we share our data? So these are the biggest areas, I think, certainly in this country, that we can address.
Thank you, Peter. And I'll move on to Nicola. However, I'll open up the question a bit. So, interested to know the big opportunity in fintech within blockchain, but we also know as an area, and I'm sure most in the room will agree with this, it can be a bit of a Marmite topic, blockchain, and it can be difficult to engage with people outside of the sector. So maybe giving the answer ahead of the question, but what do you feel are the biggest barriers to our adoption with blockchain, and how, as a task force, can we help tackle those?
Wonderful. Let me break that down a little. So where I think blockchain or the distributed ledger technology presents an opportunity in financial services in a number of fronts, actually. We're already seeing new types of currencies develop. We're already seeing questions around payments, the future of value exchange. And what's exciting about that is that it's starting to cut down the time that's required. And why that's important is because it opens up broader market potential. And we can see where this is going because we already see the regulators in the UK and indeed across the world really interested in this. I'm not sure if anybody's seen the headlines over the last few days about what the Bank of England are doing, for example, in the real-time settlements, the real-time gross settlements, the movement of money. They're thinking about how they'll use distributed ledger technology and the future of that. And that's crucial. I've also seen how the investment landscape is also thinking about how they use this technology to move money. And as I think about that from an everyday consumer's perspective, where I hope this will go is that we start to open up questions around technical things like the capital regime, the liquidity regime. And when we get to that space and we can start to make changes there, we actually can start to make financial services much more inclusive and affordable for people. And that's vital. So that's the potential opportunity here, as well as the fact that we can really create the future, the services of the future. What we need to be able to create that environment is, particularly if we use financial services as a case study, it's already an established way of working. So there are legacy systems that we need to consider. We'll need to think about how we utilize and ingest this technology alongside the current and existing infrastructure and framework. I think that's probably one of the biggest hurdles that we have. The colleagues on the panel already talked about the kind of cultural aspects of this and the ability to educate people on this. It's those kind of senior managers and middle managers who we will really need to take on the journey with us. And that comes back to Bill's point about skills and education for the future as we really think about that developing. So people are probably the first barrier to us adopting this technology. And if we can start to find a way where we bring people safely on the journey with us, then that opens up the possibilities.
Thank you. And I'll maybe come back over to yourself, Peter, on what the role of the task force could then be in helping kind of push back on those barriers.
Yeah, barriers. Well, I spent several years of my life throwing myself on the rocks of those barriers to blockchain adoption when I was running SICA. But I think here probably my greatest reflection is that the big problem is that with these technologies, the enthusiasts and founders that are driving and selling these technologies into enterprises, at least, in some of these industries such as health and manufacturing and so on, they're having to go to really go up a very steep hill to not only justify the technologies, but actually to get to an environment that they can sell into. And the biggest problem you then face is how can you form cooperating coalitions of organizations who can take advantage of these very collaborative technologies. We can't use the same models that we normally do in startup companies. We're not just selling to one enterprise. We're actually trying to engender real systems change. And that takes, a great deal of thought and effort and coordination. So I think as a task force, we have a number of members who've experienced a lot of these issues, some of them in the audience today. And we're very focused on, right now at the moment, there's a lot of education to do so that people who are not within the blockchain tent can understand where the value is and actually just understand in simple terms what the use cases are for their industries. And then really trying to move on to some way that we can allow these organizations to inexpensively sandbox and discover and kind of form their coalitions to actually move the technologies forward, and then finally find some routes to be able to provide that coordination that can allow larger projects to really move the technologies fully into adoption. So that's the route that we're on. It's very much early days. We're the kind of the education phase and trying to drive that education towards business decision makers who will make purchasing decisions in the future.
Thank you. And I think that's probably covers, we need to do this education piece with those not, as you say, inside the blockchain tent. I like that. But then I guess turning it on its head and thinking about if I am a blockchain company in Scotland, as many people in the audience may be today, why Scotland? Why should I set up a blockchain company in Scotland? What support is there for me? And I think probably everyone on the panel could probably answer this. I'm going to start with yourself, Bill, given the spin-outs that you've kind of worked with. But yeah, why Scotland and what is there out there to help me?
As I said before, Scotland is a small country. And really you have the companies that you want to collaborate with on your doorstep. And obviously in Glasgow and Edinburgh, we have a strong financial services. In Aberdeen, we have the energy sector and so on. So really there's organizations that you can work with quite easily. And with Scottish Enterprise support, we can take something like a spin-out company and we can get the high-growth spin-out program to help us to take that research idea into the market. So I think as an ecosystem, Scottish Enterprise is unique. If you ask many people in the UK, they'll tell you that they don't have that support from an enterprise agency as we have in Scotland. And obviously London is a key marketplace for innovators and investors. and you're so close. A flight from Edinburgh to Glasgow or on the train, and you're right into London. I think a key point also is that Scotland is very much a Eurocentric. It's an international country which is very inclusive. It really wants to bring people. It has a very pro-migration strategy. It wants to bring intellect. Just like Zug in Switzerland attracted the best cryptography, blockchain engineers to come and create a place that went from the poorest canton in Switzerland to be one of the richest. So we need to be able to provide a place and an environment and a country that people want to come and live here. And while the weather isn't always perfect, the culture, the quality of life that you get here is so important. And when it comes to education, you'll actually find that Edinburgh is actually one of the most educated cities in the whole world. There are more graduates in Edinburgh that you'll find on virtually every inch of the planet. There's only a few places in the US that actually have that. So education is at our core, and we really see that as an important aspect of our work. You'll find world-leading universities in every city that you go to in Scotland. And I think it's a welcome place. And I must say, we're very close to the EU. Unfortunately, we left the EU, not a political point of view, but I think from a market point of view, we left the EU. But now Scotland is doing everything it can to be able to bring up the links with the EU, because the EU is almost an exemplar. We saw from a previous talk the way that the EU is pushing forward regulations to improve sustainability, to improve digital identity. The EID and the EIDAS2 system is, to me, the best role model that we've ever seen for the adoption of a tokenized economy. And really, it will transform the EU. And if Scotland, the UK, and other countries outside the EU do not adopt that approach of a tokenized economy, then we will fail. So the opportunities are there, and a quick hop across the sea, and you're into the EU. So I think this is one of the best places in the world to grow a business. We've grown 4 businesses here. They have all been successful, and we've always found funding from Scottish investors. We have 2 new companies on the way, and they were supported through Scottish Enterprise. So I think Scotland is a great place to come and work and build a business. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. And the same question to Nicola.
I'm not sure how I can follow that passion, to be honest, but thank you, Bill. So I agree with most of what Bill has said. And in addition, I probably would add the ability and the global footprint that Scotland has. So the number of large financial institutions, as an example in my sector, that are global businesses is quite significant, and they are basing decision makers here in Scotland. So they can see that talent. We don't have to look far in Glasgow to see the investment recently from the likes of JP Morgan, Barclays, and others who actually see that capability. And so those decision makers are sitting here. And that ability to connect easily, because we are a small country, to get in front of the right people. If you look at the diversity across this panel today, you have innovators, you have regulators, you have policymakers, you have business, and you have academics. You know, that's a typical example of how connected we are in Scotland with that global footprint and the ability to have that, the time zone in which we sit is a significant advantage.
Yeah, completely agree. Thank you. And then I'm going to finish that one up with yourself, Peter. You've been there, done it. You've co-founded a blockchain company in Scotland. So tell me, why Scotland, and what other areas are there that provide support for these companies?
Right, so agree with much of what Bill said there, but I'd sort of take a bit of a more practical note here. So it's a national sport in Scotland to slag off the Economic Development Agency and our institutions, our ecosystem institutions, but actually, Scotland and Scottish Enterprise give excellent support to pre-seed companies. So if you're going to start an organization in tech, deep tech, one thing you're going to need is money. So you're going to need money to get started and recruit your engineers. There's ways to get that money. You can go equity routes, but in terms of non-equity funding, Scottish Enterprise gives some really good support, and in the form, I don't even know what the grant's called these days, but in our days it was a smart feasibility study. It made a fantastic difference. We, as were 3 founders at the time, put up our own cash, and we were awarded a cash upfront grant, none of this claim back stuff, which is useless when you're getting started, from Scottish Enterprise. Without it, I think it would have been maybe not impossible, but certainly a lot slower to get the company going. So I think that's a form of support which, as far as I understand, doesn't exist elsewhere in the UK, and it certainly doesn't exist in the other country I know really well, which is Estonia. So really look at that, work with a Scottish Enterprise account manager, and I'm sure Sarah will write a check at the end of this to get you started. There's great engineering expertise, and I think just having the engine room of like Edinburgh University and Napier and Bill's guys near at hand is really, really useful. We didn't take so much advantage of that, but a lot of other companies did. Where things fall down a little bit, when you go for that equity funding, this is not a great environment for that pre-seed funding. It's very easy to get yourself wrapped up in the wrong kind of views and wrapped up with organizations who have misaligned incentives to your own. What that means is your company may go on to be successful, but it doesn't necessarily create rich founders. So that's definitely something to watch out for. And I would certainly recommend that you make sure you're educated around that and look elsewhere for that form of funding, and only when your company is ready. But that initial support for pre-seed, fantastic. I don't think there's a better place in the world than Scotland.
Thank you. And I definitely did not pay these to either side of me to give Scottish Enterprise a plug there. But we do obviously have a real range of support for businesses, so it is worth checking that out. And I think as well, just to add into that, something around how this ecosystem is growing. So, we've established this task force, obviously the work Colin is doing with BlockStart, Matches in the back there with this Blockchain Scotland, it's really exciting to see things start to pick up in this space after the kind of drop in 2017, 2018. So I think if we can start to bring more of the ecosystem together and work collaboratively, grow, that's also going to help us engage more with industry as well. So there is lots of support out there. If you're a company looking to take that step into that space, then please do reach out. So we'll move on. How are we doing for time? So I think in terms of, looking a little bit outside, and I know we have got some people from across the globe here today, but I'm really interested to also think about how can Scotland learn from what's going on in other countries. We know we are by no ways the leaders in this space. There's lots of exciting things happening in other areas. So I'm going to take this back to you, Peter, and with your kind of experience, certainly with Estonia, but in other areas, what do you think Scotland can learn from other countries who are leading in this space?
Thanks, Sarah. So, as you know, I'm an honorary consul of Estonia, so I can't really see past Estonia. I am a little bit biased. I think the big thing for me is that government must innovate. I think innovation needs to come from our government institutions to kind of seed the market to allow industry to adopt. That's a big thing I see in Estonia, where there are talented people in government who move into the private sector and back again. I'm not sure why it is they can do that. It must be something about the way the pensions work, but you get this kind of cross-fertilization, so you have a sense of common purpose across the private sector and the public sector. I see them building infrastructure, investing in infrastructure, and that infrastructure being built by SMEs, so procurement selecting young, scrappy startups to build stuff and get stuff done, so that those companies really get a leg up and get a global marketplace. And I think the other big thing that they do in Estonia is they seem to have the knack of creating unicorns and creating rich founders. They're really good rich founders because they've got money and they put it back into startup companies and founders get shit done. You know, that's a kind of an ecosystem that really works. So I think it's really about just creating an environment where people want to come to do startups, and I think that Scotland has the capacity to do that, and we can learn from other places around the world. The last thing I'll give a mention is I know one of our task force members, Duncan, he's here today with Paravella. I don't think there's microphones in the audience, Duncan, but he's had a lot of support in the Middle East and North Africa region for how he can pull a company together based jointly in Scotland and Saudi Arabia. So you might want to speak to Duncan, who will give you a wee wave at the back there. Won't he? Thank you, Duncan. Yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Peter. So conscious of time, and I'm sure we could spend a lot longer talking about some of the opportunities, but we're going to finish up with, for everyone on the panel, I just want you to think about if there was one thing that Scotland had to do right now to unlock that 4 billion opportunity by 2030, what would it be? And I'll hand that over to Tom first.
Thanks very much, Sarah. And I'd love that there would be a simple solution to this, but I think if there's anything Scotland could be doing, it is making use of all of that expertise. I mean, I think Bill understated it when he talked about Edinburgh as a centre of academic excellence. Scotland as a whole, I think at one point had more universities in the top 500 than anywhere else in the world. So that's some serious human capital that can be turned to any problem. And Scotland also has an ethos of collective interest, much like Peter was describing for Estonia, that I think it could also be harnessing. So I think we need to be coming together to understand those systems, those complicated systems in our society, so that we can develop solutions to support them through decentralized data infrastructure.
Thank you. On to Nicola. What's the one thing for you?
I think it's about how we tell our story. To really, really capture this opportunity, we have to bring people with us on that journey. And so how we tell that story powerfully, how we use really good use cases that resonate with those decision makers, that's vital. So it's about our story.
Thanks. And I think I'm going to save Bill till the end. I feel like you're going to have a mic drop moment, so I'll take it to Peter next.
So my wish, if I go wave my magic wand, there's really talented people in the Scottish public sector. I mean, just look at Tom. I saw him riding his bike no-handed yesterday morning across the meadows. It was quite an achievement. But I think what's often missing is the political will to really drive change and really grab our economy by the scruff of the neck and move it forward. So my wish would be that we would appoint a government CIO at cabinet level and give him the levers that he really needs to move public sector forward and empower people like Tom and his colleagues to change our country for the better. That would be my wish.
I like it. Well, Tom, you're taking that one on board there?
I'm remaining neutral on this topic.
Okay, and then finally, Bill, what's your one thing?
One thing.
Only one.
One thing. Well, cryptography has secured our world, but not actually very well. It is one of the least understood areas in the whole of cybersecurity. As Microsoft can take a cloud, their Azure cloud down for one day because they didn't upgrade a digital certificate, then there is something wrong. So cryptography needs to remap our society and our community and make sure that citizens have the rights to privacy. So we really need to disrupt as much as we want, as we should. And if you want a world which is full of Microsofts and Metas and Netflix and so on, then let it be, because they will become the dominant force. They will become the static dinosaurs which will bring our whole world down. So we need to disrupt as much as possible. We need to move away from our paper-based approaches and move towards a truly digital society which has people at its core. and society needs to be remodeled in a trustworthy way. Thanks.
Thank you. There's probably not much more I can add into that, but you have all been fantastic panelists. Again, just one final plug. We are a new task force, so we'll hope to be sharing a lot more information and activity with you over the next few months. And if you are interested to hear more about the task force, engage with us, collaborate, then we'd love to hear. So again, you can follow us on LinkedIn, drop us a message, or we're all around this afternoon as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.